Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith, the mother-daughter travel team and publishers of the digital interactive Big Blend Radio and TV magazine, as well as Parks and Travel magazine. And, today's show, we're very excited to welcome back lawyer, clinical social worker, veteran mediator, and best-selling author of over 14 books now, I think, Bill Eddy. He's joining us today to talk about his latest book, Why We Elect Narcissists and Sociopaths and How We Can Stop. Bill is a senior family mediator at the National Conflict Resolution Center and co-founder and training director of the High Conflict Institute. And you can learn more about his books and programs. Just go to highconflictinstitute.com and, of course, get his book on Amazon, all those places, Barnes & Noble. Get all 14 of them. Welcome back, Bill. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much, Lisa and Nancy. Glad to be traveling with you again.
Yeah, today we're in Florence, Colorado. It's a beautiful day. If you'd called and talked with us yesterday, we might have had some storms, but that's the interesting thing about being on the plains up here in Colorado. Beautiful Arkansas River, but you're in San Diego, which is beautiful and sunny, right? With coast and ocean.
We're having a beautiful summer. It's in the 70s, and all the people from Arizona are starting to come in because it's 110 or more there. So, yeah, we've got a great climate here, so I'm happy.
Awesome. Awesome. I remember the last time you came on the show, you taught us about high conflict personalities, and now you're talking about high conflict politicians, right? So it's still the HCPs, but it's gone from personalities to politicians. And I want to start with asking just kind of give an overview of the three things: a narcissist, a sociopath, and then what a high conflict personality is.
Okay, great. Let me start with what a high conflict personality is, because the big thing about high conflict personalities are the person focuses on a target of blame. So they could be your neighbor, they could be your spouse, they could be your boss, they could be really anyone who targets someone else as the cause of all their problems, and they take no responsibility. So it's this target of blame. With that are three other characteristics: a lot of all or nothing thinking, often unmanaged emotions, just start yelling or run out of a room, things like that, and extreme behaviors. They may do things that 90% of people would never do, even if they were tired or stressed or whatever. So one thing I want to quickly mention is, as I talk about this, people may recognize people in their life. And I always suggest you don't tell people you think they have a high conflict personality. That doesn't go over very well. So just make a list in your head of, friends, relatives, all of that. Now, narcissists and sociopaths. So narcissists and sociopaths are diagnoses in the manual for mental health professionals. Sociopaths in the manual is called antisocial personality disorder. And I'm not going to diagnose that. And diagnosis takes several traits and a personal interview and all of that. But I'll tell you 4 key traits that, when combined with high conflict personality, can actually be the people that love to get elected, but probably the last people who should be elected because they can become dangerous. So let's start with narcissists. People have heard about narcissists, self-centered, all of that, but they're also grandiose. They really see the world as, ready for them to play God, ready for them to be in charge. They've got incredible ideas, often with no basis for those ideas. They have fantasies of unlimited power. And not all narcissists have this, but the ones who want to be elected as the group leader, as the mayor, governor, president, etc., are the ones that have these fantasies of unlimited power. They have a lack of empathy, which really surprises people. It's like they really don't care about you. If you're convenient, then they'll hold you up. You might be a trophy for them. If you look really great, They want to stand beside you, so they'll look really great. If you're brilliant, they'll say they really know you, and so you'll think they're brilliant too. So it's this lack of empathy in using people and a drive to be superior, which means that at first they're really charming and befriend you, but sooner or later they have to put you down to put themselves up.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
So narcissists really aren't all that great. It's not just that they're self-centered. They actually have to put other people down to prove they're superior. So you want to watch out for that. Now, sociopathic traits are a little worse. They're highly aggressive. They're highly deceitful. So they could lie a lot, con people. They might pretend they're somebody else or have a scheme. Certainly you see this on the internet. A lot of schemes on the internet are really sociopaths. And you have no idea who they are, where they are, what their names are, what they look like. And when they're anonymous, then, they'll take risks. They have a drive to dominate other people. They're your bully personality. And the others can be bullies, but these are like full-time bullies. They want to boss people around, push people around, show them that they can really take over their lives, sometimes over their possessions. And of course, extreme sociopaths that are some of our killers, but not most of them aren't. And they have a lack of remorse. So they really don't care if they lie to you, hurt you, steal from you, etc. But they're not all in prison. About maybe 50% of sociopaths end up with a criminal record. The other half may actually be successful in business. There's a fair number on Wall Street and a lot of other places. So that's kind of a nutshell.
Wow. So that's kind of big, because it seems that no matter what, out of all three high conflict personalities, narcissists and sociopaths, that they want to be on this pedestal of power. That seems to be the common trait, right?
Yes. And that's really what we're seeing today. That's why I wrote the book, because we're really seeing them really running for all kinds of offices in many countries, not just in the United States. And they take this same approach. They want to be in power, and they'll lie, cheat, and steal to get there.
Is this a learned behavior pattern, or are you just born that way?
Excellent question. And the answer is somewhat yes. But I'll be more specific. So personality development tends to be a combination of your genetics, of your early childhood, and the culture you grow up in. And what we find is, let's start with sociopaths, that there seems to be significantly genetic, that there's a higher incidence of sociopaths, children of sociopaths becoming sociopaths, etc., compared to other personalities. But it's not all inborn. Early life experience can play a huge part. Children who are abused a lot, especially by their own parents, there's a risk that they will develop personality disorders like these, sociopathic, narcissistic, other personality disorders. There's 10 in the manual for mental health professionals. So early childhood, first 5 years, makes a huge difference. But the culture someone grows up in too could make a difference. If you grow up in a war zone, you're going to be a lot more, you're going to be less remorseful about protecting yourself. You may have less empathy for your enemy so that you can survive, since it may not be both of you. So you may learn things like that from your culture, even after the first 5 years. So it could be a combination. What we see with sociopaths, there's a lot of it may be inborn, some early childhood, some culture. Narcissists may be more early childhood and culture. We live in a narcissistic culture today.
Yes.
So the average person today, if let's say people born in 1920 who went through the Depression, World War II, had job security, but looked out for each other, didn't talk about themselves very much. If they were to meet somebody today, they would say, boy, that's a self-centered person. And you see this in the workplace where you have people from different generations, because each generation is becoming more and more narcissistic because they're becoming more individualistic because of our toys and all of these electronic things.
But then, okay, so when you look at social media and likes and followers, isn't that kind of pushing it?
Yeah, and I think it's a problem. All new media seems, and I looked back 100 years in writing this book, and each time there's new media, I think you see narcissists and sociopaths use it a lot. They're the most aggressive, the most eager to be center of attention. And so you see a lot of misuse, and then there starts being limit setting, and people start saying, wait a minute, I'm not going to let my kids watch that show, or I'm going to not take my phone with me to this event tonight, or whatever. So people are slowly learning to set limits on themselves. And also, there's a lot of talk now about restraining Facebook, discussion in the Congress, et cetera. So each new media ends up with some kind of balance, and we're certainly not there. Maybe 10 years from now. But not right there, we're not, because people have really taken advantage of it.
I think it's just, whenever something new is, it's this big something new, and then everybody jumps on, goes crazy, and then realizes, we can't be like that, just like smoking, But what I see in politicians, even when Barack Obama was the first person to really utilize social media to get attention of the younger generations, right? He went on and did that, but I didn't see anything much negativity come out there. So this is where I wanted to ask, because no matter what, if it's a president, if it's a mayor, head of the board of a chamber of commerce, any kind of the water board, that's a big deal, actually. Anybody getting into any kind of board situation where you're going to be the leader, this is now a power thing. No matter how you look at it, even if they go in on a positive thing. So we've got to kind of watch that, right? So they may not be a full-on narcissist or a full-on sociopath or anything, but you got to still watch, right? With all this power.
I think you're making a good point, because in general, our personalities kind of lean more this way, lean more that way, and that's where the culture really comes into play. And so you're getting people who take more risks, say things they wouldn't ordinarily say. And the culture right now really pays a lot of it to the modetic behavior. And so what happens is we're reinforcing extreme behavior. And if you think about it, especially with media competition, you're going to watch cable, you're going to watch network, you're going to look at the news on Facebook. Where are you going to put your eyeballs? And they're all fighting hard for that. And the way to get your attention is to show the most extreme negative behavior. And so what we're getting is what grabs you. And for grown-ups, that's entertaining. And for kids, it's training. And so kids are growing up today seeing, wow, you have to insult people to get ahead. Wow, you have to have extreme plans. You have to wreck the whole system in order to get attention and get elected. And so what we're seeing is we're not reinforcing community standards. We're really reinforcing the opposition to community standards.
It's actually going for pushing extreme. And you said negativity, which is was one of my first questions I wanted to ask you was, when you think about these power plays and the negative stuff that is happening, I mean, no matter, I pick a country right now, right? And that's why I think it's so important about your book right now. It's so timely. Every country needs to read this, because the political thing, the drama that is going on is worldwide. and it's
Yes.
negative. And what I'm worried about is
Dangerous.
we talk about how our brains work, how we focus on the negative, and we have to kind of train our brain to focus on the positive a lot, right? You have to have that. What is it that we respond more to negativity than we do positivity in our brains? So I'm wondering now about all of this political upheaval around the
The
world
brain,
that's
the
going
brain,
negative.
yeah, because the brain, some people, brain researchers say the brain's about 80-20. 80 focuses more on the negative because you have to survive.
Right.
Right.
So if you're doing a math problem
Mm.
and suddenly, you know, I'm trying to think of where you are. So somebody's dog escapes and comes over and bites you. You need to pay attention to that dog rather than the math problem you're working on. Or
Right.
you're driving and you leaves into your
Mm.
lane, your brain's really designed to change subjects and deal with what's the person weaving into your lane. So in many ways, this is really good characteristics of the brain, but because of our technology, because of our ability to communicate in the ways we're doing today, it actually manipulates the brain. And so we're pulling ourselves into the negative because that's where we pay attention. And I'd like to suggest, picture back to Walter Cronkite. Walter Cronkite decided what the news was, and he told you what he thought was important to know. And there's a whole lot of garbage that he screened out. Today, we go for the garbage because that's what gets our attention, and we're screening out ourselves the most useful information because we're responding to what grabs us. And that's where Facebook, cable news 24/7, all of that grabs us. But another piece I want to add about the brain is now that we do it on screens, is you see people's faces and
Mhm.
you also hear people's voices, and faces and voices go to a different part of the brain than, say, written information, books, magazines, where you can stop, think, pick it up again. With face and voice coming at you, often you're just absorbing what's coming at you. You could stop some things, put them on pause, but we absorb so much without consciously thinking because we're absorbing the faces and voices into, in many ways, what some researchers say is the right brain and the right
Mhm.
amygdala, which process stuff really non-verbally and faster.
Hmm.
So don't we just kind of react more like, I kind of feel like we're fear-based because
Yeah.
we're in survival mode more than we maybe need to be in?
Absolutely. This is one of the things I addressed in the book, and that is, objectively speaking, the world is probably in a better shape today than it's ever been in human history. We have fewer active
Wow.
wars. We have fewer hungry people. We have, right now, although it's in jeopardy, probably more democracy, maybe a little less than 5 or 10 years ago, but generally, a lot of democracy spread over the last 50 years. Health, people are living longer, all that stuff.
Mhm.
So objectively, if a Martian landed and looked around, 100 years ago and they looked around today, they'd say, wow, these folks made great progress.
Mm.
The one area that's really frightening, scary, etc., is our news, our media, all
Mm.
of that, because that's what we talk about. And one thing I learned as a therapist is how you think influences how you feel. And if you see it's cloudy out and you go, oh, another gray day, I'm depressed. And you go, well, wait a minute. I could read a book. I could go to the movies. I can do all this stuff. Oh, what a relief. I don't have to do yard work, So
Coco.
how you think about reality influences how you feel about reality. And we're getting bombarded with negative messages telling us it's dangerous. Because Nancy, you're right, it's fear-based.
Mhm.
And conflict, crisis, chaos are what sells, what grabs our attention, and that's what dominates the media today is conflict, crisis, and chaos. And that all triggers fear in us, and that makes us watch.
And that's the fuel for these people.
But I think a lot of them are scared. They're more scared than we might realize.
You mean the leaders that want to be
Yes.
elected?
Yeah.
Yes, yes and no. And that's where what's interesting about sociopaths is they're calculating. Like sociopaths pick their targets of blame. And if you look through history, like I didn't realize this, but researching this book is Joe McCarthy was actually in financial trouble, had tax problems, and he was looking for a distraction and decided that communists in the government would be a good distraction. And television had just started, and so he wanted to televise his hearings. And I think he's an example of that aggressive energy, self-centered energy that takes over a new media. And for 4 years, he really scared the country. And then it was figured out it's all his fantasy. He didn't find communists in the government trying to take over all his hearings, and he didn't find any. And it went away, and no one took over the government after he left. And he kind of died a lonely alcoholic. Maybe a year or so after he was center stage of the world in many ways.
Wow.
So
That's what's so interesting about this. Here's these big powers, and then they really change what's going on and how a country is working together, how the country communicates. Do we start to break our fabric of being as united as a country? And I think now, and like I said, it's not just this country, it's around the world. Look what's happening in England too, This break apart thing, there's the individualism, which you can only go so far on your own. Everybody has to work together on something. Even in business, you don't get along. You don't have business without a customer, which means you're not alone. It just doesn't work. Right. So you can't. So at this point, we have to kind of like come back and say, hello, wakey, wakey. And what I want to know is, I know our audience is, we have a very socially conscious audience. I know that they're environmentally and sustainable and all of that. They're very conscious, but I also know they come from different walks of life and different political backgrounds, which I truly appreciate. I think it's important to have different ideas. So when we look at this kind of thing, narcissists, sociopaths, are we talking about this could be in any situation, really, in a local, a federal, the national government? This isn't anybody being elected, whether it's state, your town, it's everywhere.
Exactly. And what people have to realize is think in terms of someone, say, who's an actively drinking alcoholic. And you could say, I don't hate that guy. I feel bad for him. But I'm certainly not going to put him in the driver's seat and say, go ahead and drive somewhere.
Right.
You just had, you finished a 6-pack. I don't want you to be the driver,
Yeah, no thanks.
And so that's the thing. We have to learn not to hate people who are different. And in fact, these folks can be in any group. And what I think is we need more personality awareness, where we go, okay, so that's not a good person to put in power. They're fine as an entertainer. I mean, high conflict people are great entertainers.
Right, yeah.
Don't put them in the driver's seat. To me, that's the whole point of my book is, I have empathy for all people. I respect all people, but don't give some people power. These are the last people, but they're the ones that want it the most, often because other things aren't really working that well.
But that's what the media too. I mean, it's like how many movie stars end up running, a government? I mean, it's like Clint Eastwood was a mayor. I'm not saying he did a good or bad job. I'm like, what is Dirty Harry doing running a community?
Right. And he's made great movies. And I think, one of the problems in politics is you don't need any experience to go into politics.
You just need
you
money.
Can't just become a major movie maker without, 30 years of experience like he has. That makes him good at that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether he was a good mayor or not.
I don't know either, but I just thought that was funny when I saw that.
Yeah. But good mayors, I really believe that the people that are skilled, it's amazing, but politics is actually a skill. You need to be able to get along with people. You need to be able to compromise without feeling like you hate yourself. You need to be able to find out what other people think, not just tell them what you think. So there's all these skills, But high conflict people don't have that. Their special skill is getting attention, and they get it by being extreme. And when you make them leaders, they do extreme things, and that's what frightens me.
And then they have to get bigger and bigger to keep that.
Yeah, they have to keep outdoing themselves.
It's like drug addicts, the first hit, and then you need to keep chasing that first hit.
Right.
But
right.
couldn't you see this in a child? Can you see behavior that would tip you off that this child could become high conflict personality 5 years down the road?
I think, first of all, probably first 8 years of life, they show all the characteristics of all personality disorders, and that's fine because they're learning, they're growing up. And that's why we, quotes, raise children. But, from my experience, I'm allowed to diagnose personality disorders, other mental health issues with people I've met and done a clinical interview with. So I don't diagnose public figures. Right. I might say they've got some traits, but that's not a disorder, just some traits. But the idea is supposed to be adults. So we're not supposed to diagnose kids. But all the adults that I've dealt with personality disorders, and I've dealt with many as a therapist, as a lawyer, sometimes even as a mediator, they have a history. It goes way back. They were difficult, probably from 5 or 8 years old on. People go, whoa, that person's a little different. And so I think the more parents learn about this, that the more influence they can have, because you can. And one thing, I just gave a recent seminar about sociopaths to mental health professionals, lawyers, judges, mediators. And one thing I had found out, and I told them, is the research shows that people with antisocial personality disorder are showing signs of that by 10 years old. About half of them by 10 years old, about 95% of them by 12 years old. And so if you see a child is the time when you can influence them to get on a better track. And so if people go, oh, he's just, being a kid, and he started a fire or he stole from the store or whatever, you better take strong action, because that's the kind of stuff that can grow in a bad direction.
Oh, wow.
And so I think the more parents know about this, the better, because, kids can be influenced. And as adults, it's really hard to treat sociopaths. There really isn't a good treatment for them right now. Some of the others, narcissists, there's some treatment for, but they don't go because they think they know more than the therapist. But with sociopaths, is get them as kids, because you can influence them. All of the personality disorders, you have a chance to kind of redirect that in childhood and adolescence. And as a society, we're doing the opposite. We're showing and bombarding them with all these images of bad behavior. So we have a chance here. I'm hopeful, because I think we know what to do. It's just most people don't know about it, and the culture's headed in the other direction of what's balanced.
When people are so attached to the media, and that's something that we see these personalities really cling on to, because that's how they can, we do radio, so we get once in a while you'll get someone on a show and we're like, oh, here comes the hijacker, and it's like you can tell. And then they're not allowed back on, because you can tell they're here to just, this is what I'm doing. And it's like, everybody move over. I'm the biggest, I'm the best. And it's like, that's not happening with us. It doesn't work well with us, because we're the biggest. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. but there's,
nice.
With us listening, you can tell as you're talking with someone that, this is a person in that way. And that's something I think is important, because media, whether it's social media, TV, radio, whatever it is, podcasts, all these platforms we have, are there things that we can be aware of, to watch out for, to say, okay, they're doing this, oh, they've done it again. I mean, I know that you watch TV, there's people, or you go in a boardroom, even if you're going meet your legislators yourself, go knock on the door, see how they do. There's this hand movement with, and it seems to be men doing this especially to women, where their thumb and their finger are of both hands are locked like this, and they just kind of do this
Oh, you're
thing,
talking about that power thing.
the power thing.
Yeah, the this.
I can't. I can't stand it.
It's like the
Putting their fingertips together.
Yeah, this
it's
thing.
like the you know.
There's things like that that it always just gets under my skin. Like, who do you think you are doing this? You know, it's just kind of like I'm lording above you attitude, and it's those kind of things. I wonder.
Condescending.
Yeah, body language, what they're putting out that we can be aware of.
Well, what's interesting, I have a method called the web method, and it's pay attention to words, your emotions, and their behavior. So if you just focus on your emotions, if you start feeling, wait a minute, I'm starting to feel a little dominated by this person, or I'm starting to feel insulted and put down, like maybe I'm stupid. And I remember one day I was driving home from work and I was feeling really stupid. And I was thinking, I'm no good at a lot of this stuff. I thought I knew what something, but I don't. And then I go, wait a minute, was I around a narcissist today? Oh yes, at 10 o'clock I met with a narcissist and he was bragging about how smart he was, better than everybody else. And I remember starting to feel stupid around him. That's a warning sign.
Wow.
And if you feel like strangling the person, that's a warning sign.
Well, that's a good one.
If you feel like they might strangle you, that's a warning
That's
sign.
a good one.
So your feelings can tell you. If you feel like you can't wait to escape the room because they won't stop talking, like a histrionic personality. Histrionic personalities are great in Hollywood because they're very good at getting attention, but they're not good to be friends with or have around because they never let go. They just they want to be the absolute center.
And suck everything out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how you feel may tip you off. Some of the words they use, is there a lot of all or nothing language? Do they say, oh, these are the best people? Do they say, you're the best person I ever met? My experience is that person sooner or later will say you're the worst person.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you aim for balance and think balance is really what works, especially in relationships, it's the extremes that you want to watch out for. The people that are ready to rock the boat so much that you're going to spill and drown.
Well, when we watch election cycles, and I've seen it progressively get worse and worse and worse. And the language, the filth, how, I mean, used to be, your child wants to grow up and be president, and then now you're just like, no, I don't want my kid to even hear the elections. That's what is worrying me about now, is like, how do we, yet you can teach them from that, maybe, depending on their age. It is horrific. It is, even the way the dirty laundry and all of this stuff, and then you find out everything about every politician you don't even want to know. It's
right.
And then people just, even as I'm starting to say this, I just want to turn off about it, but I can't, because I live here and I live on this planet, and I care about the planet. So it's like, okay, I got to do something. I can't just automatically switch off. But how many of us go, I got to make dinner instead?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a few things. One is, and a third of the book is what to do. Mm-hmm. And one is having people learn about these patterns and realize that people, for example, who blame other people a lot means they don't take responsibility. Mm-hmm. And if they don't take responsibility, it means that they don't learn and they don't change. And so when you see someone who blames a lot, that's someone who's not going to do well in the job. You don't hire them to be a CEO. You don't hire them to be PTA president. You don't hire them to be in charge of anything except entertainment. And so just knowing, watch out for people who blame others a lot. The all or nothing words, that wonderful, you're terrible. But what I do is, so in the book I teach about that, but I also teach parents. I deal with a lot of I do a lot of consultations. I deal with a lot of high conflict divorce, high conflict people in the workplace, in the neighborhood. And what I teach parents is teach your kids the 4 big skills for life. And these 4 big skills are flexible thinking, rather than all or nothing thinking. You know, that you consider new ideas rather than as soon as someone says something, say, oh, that's wrong, that's terrible. Say, think about it, and then respond. Managed emotions. And so we manage our emotions. And so when things are stressful, sometimes we take a break. So we keep our emotions so we can keep our relationships, because in relationships, extreme emotions blow up relationships. So we manage our emotions. Moderate behavior is not doing the extremes, but doing things in the moderate range in terms of how to get along. And so that's a good thing to teach kids. Just like you don't scream in the house, you don't run in the house, you walk in the house, you scream at the park. So learning all of that, but teaching these as the 4 big skills. Parents really say they found this very helpful. And the 4th part is checking yourself rather than blaming other people. Say, wait a minute, what was my part of this problem? And is there something I could do differently next time? And I would bet if you were to ask today's politicians, that there's probably a % that couldn't ask themselves those 2 questions and never do.
Well, and having to take responsibility has got to be the hardest thing on the planet for some. It's it is a difficult thing, because you have to be, oh, I did this, but I've learned that it is quicker. You get through it quicker if you just take it on. just
Yeah.
It's hard. It's easy to say right now, but it isn't that easy. But I do know that you get through things quicker if you just embrace it.
And also, encouraging people, take a break, take a deep breath, because we're smarter when we're emotionally calm. The emotions, the extreme emotions really are part of who we are to protect ourselves from immediate danger, like a flood or there's all kinds of things I could mention. But, a fire, something that's immediate, so you can't think, you just have to move your body. And so that's what our intense emotions really are developed for. And they blow up relationships. I've done a lot of high conflict divorces where there's been domestic violence, things broken, children secretly taken out of the state, all that stuff. And that's driven by emotions, in many ways driven by fear.
By fear, yeah.
But people have to manage their emotions. That's not going to work in a job. And so I tell parents, tell your kids to constantly be asking, is that person using managed emotions, moderate behavior, flexible thinking? Am I using those?
That's a very important thing, because when the political thing gets heated and the debates are happening, and then the nastiness comes from all sides, I start to look at how people are acting. And I at this point look at all of them. I'm not really happy with any of their behaviors, just to be straight up honest. I look at it because of the intensive, how it becomes a barking carnival. And then it goes from there, and then here comes the community, the greater community. And this could be, like I say, from your small town all the way to the national, the global. Then that riles up, and now we have these outlets on Facebook. And everybody has these knockdown, drag-out fights because they can hide behind a screen, even if people know each other. And then it's like, well, I'm deleting you. Well, I'm deleting you. And I'm like, really?
Delete you.
I'm glad you don't all have a gun in your hand right now and they're in the same room, because the way they're acting is so extreme, out of control, that how are we doing as a society with that?
Well, I think there's several things I'll say as a society, and then about politicians. As a society, we really need to set limits on that stuff. I think setting limits is a big theme. With every new media, we have to learn, where's the balance? What's the appropriate setting limits? So we have to personally say, look, I'm not going to watch that. I'm going to turn it off. When people start doing that, I'm going to turn it off, or I'm going to just end the conversation now. So we have to personally do that. I think as a society, as a community, we have to say that certain things aren't okay. I think we have to support parents who set limits on their kids and say, you can't watch that show, or I'm taking the phone away, or whatever. We have to support that. So we're at a stage age where we're setting limits, we, primarily politicians, set the tone for the whole culture. And what we're experiencing today is the effect of cultural leaders saying awful things, dividing people, saying every day over and over again, we're polarized. I personally don't think we're as polarized as we're told every day. And that we need to go, okay, I'm not buying that. I want to stay. I mean, in my neighbors I get along with, my relatives, we've got, liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans in my family, and we all get along. And so we don't have to be polarized, but we're told we're polarized, and everyone becomes more afraid and says more extreme things and talks about them and us. And what I think is we have to put a check on that ourselves. Whenever people start talking about us and them, is to say, wait a minute, is this really an us and them, or is this just a big us problem? And that's what I like about the United States, is it's us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I know Nancy and I travel full time, and we've been talking about this on shows. We've some musicians that do a lot of travel too, and we were talking about this just recently, saying as we travel, we're meeting people from all walks of life, and people are really friendly. We actually have a very friendly country, and it's like, even if you're not talking politics or whatever, or maybe you do, and you go, oh yeah, that's not my thing, but I like you on this, let's talk about this, well, maybe it's because we talk about parks and travel, and that's easy and fun, but it's where people can unite, because parks are where you go and you'll have everybody in a park. Maybe one's fishing, one's bird watching, one's rowing a kayak or paddling a kayak. You can tell I'm not good at kayaking, but you could, everybody's doing something different, but enjoying this space in this united way. And that's what we love about parks. But Nancy, isn't this true? America is friendly.
Yeah.
In general.
Well, and for the most part, unless there's some drama happening, people are respectful of each other. And when you watch television, when you watch the news, especially if you're watching politicians, they do not always treat each other with respect. Like there used to be in a debate, my esteemed colleague. Now it's just, let me call you a name and then laugh about it. And then, when you do that, your followers are following something that could turn on them at any time, and they could be the ones next called the name. So I see that what we see on our everyday travels is not what we see in, let me choose the words really carefully, our so-called leadership of this country. That's not what we see on a day-to-day basis at all.
I want to comment on this, because I think you're making a super important point, and that is, in person, people tend to get along pretty well.
Yeah.
And I helped an organization that was having conflicts, and it was actually an international organization, about 15 people involved. There was a board of directors, and they started having a bunch of nasty emails. And it was like, whoa, you need to have a phone call. And so there was a conference call, and people were nicer to each other, and things weren't as nasty. And then there was a regularly scheduled teleconference. And so you got like 15 people, you can see each other's faces, taking turns talking. People are even nicer to each other. Then they had a meeting in person, and everyone's pretty much getting along again. And I really think this has much more to do with media than with real conflicts. And that we're seeing things as a conflict because on the media, we have to see the extremes to grab your eyeballs. And in real life, you want to get along. You don't want to make the person you're talking to hate you. You're going to go fishing together, or you're going to go, out to dinner together. There's no benefit in calling each other names. But on TV, if you call each other names in the right way, you'll be highlighted on tonight's news, and it'll go viral. So ironically, we're teaching the bad behavior through the media, and it's rippling down into real life.
Mm.
And we need to reverse this and say, look, here's the good behavior, and when you do that bad behavior, we're going to turn you off.
I agree, and that's it. Because there are ways to go watch C-SPAN. I know sometimes they're sleeping and while there should be, but watch away from the talking heads or the swearing heads or the that banter, because it is, we all have opinions, right? We all know the saying about that. We all have opinions, but the reality is, journalism should be journalism.
Right.
And I think there are journalists still out there. There really are. But it's like what you're saying, it's how this media has been changed up. And it is about like us making a choice at the grocery store. Are we going to buy the organic clean food? Are we going to buy the chemicals? Are we going to take control? This is, at the end of the day, a leader cannot lead a mass of people if we don't buy into it.
Exactly.
Well, but then I do have there's one thing you said that really kind of in two minds about, like, just turn it off. If you just turn that off, doesn't that let that one side take over because you're not watching your back anymore?
Well, my own feeling is that you need your information on many subjects from many sources. And certainly in politics, it's important to have more than one source. And what was found, some of the analysis of the last presidential election found that some communities only had TV now, no longer had newspapers, and that people tended to vote in more extreme directions because they didn't have the fact checking that you would get through the newspaper, where you have time to read it and all of that. So fact checking is certainly important today. One way to do that is watch more than one news source, and the other source may say, well, what you just heard isn't true because of this and this. And I put that in my book. I put a list of 10 ways to analyze fake news so that you're really finding out what's accurate there. But I think the biggest thing we have to realize, though, is that the personalities we're seeing that look exciting, that look dramatic, that have the all or nothing thinking and proposals and such, we have to learn that's not good. And that the HCPs, the high conflict people who become politicians, are not the people who should be in power, but they're people who should be on television as entertainers. And their skill is creating an image, not fulfilling the image. And the more we're aware of that, we can go, oh, I'm starting to see some signs of an HCP there. No way I'm going to vote for that person. But I also think political parties bear a responsibility here. Is you need to vet your people, and putting people in with no experience and grandiose ideas and deceitfulness is going to be a dangerous mix. And that's what HCPs are as politicians. And I hate to say it, but I think they're pouring into offices because they want to run. And in today's media environment, that's who gets attention.
That's exactly it. I don't think, it's a fear thing, and it's a power thing, and it is, hey, this is my chance of a spotlight at the end of the day. You know, and what connections can we make? I mean, when you jump into the web of it and you start to really dig in, it's like looking at what happens. I remember Nancy and I remember the Dakota Access Pipeline. We did a segment when it happened a couple years back, and we were interviewing one of the groups there, and it was right as the protesters went out and got attacked by the dogs, and we were interviewing people there and started to go, who is behind this? And once you get into politics and start to look at who's behind everything, talk about the web. That's the web, man. It just goes on forever. You'll find every bank, every oil company, every energy company, every politician, the whole list. And by the time we were done, it's like, okay, a month has gone by and we've only scratched the surface. And that's the thing. That's why we have to be very aware as individuals. I'm really, really glad you wrote this book. I remember when you came on the show before, I was like, he should write a book on politics. He's like, I'm not going to talk about politics or politicians. You're like, no, I'm not diagnosing anybody here, right? write on the show, but because we had questions like, I'm not going there. But writing this, I think it's very, very timely, and I hope it goes around the world with the information that you have, because it's empowering. And the more we inform and empower ourselves, we're empowered at that point. So thank you for writing this.
Well, thank you. And I think people should know it's really a bigger picture than any one person. And it is a trend that we're seeing. And until we learn how to reverse it, it'll keep growing. So I do hope people read the book too, just because I think collectively to survive, we're going to have to learn how to set limits on these personalities and not give them all this much power.
Exactly, and I see it in actual communities. Nancy and I, as we travel and we work with different communities, all kinds of groups, we see the narcissist and the sociopath in there, and they get in, and we've seen entire towns get wiped out by one family dictated by one person, an entire town be controlled by one family. I could give you lists of them, and it's really unfortunate. And we come in and we're like, well, we can't really help you other than you got a problem. And they're like, oh, we know. And once they're in that, it's like a one person. It's like, company towns when they own the company store owns you.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Company town.
Yes.
Yeah. We're seeing this happen now with leaders just in a small community doing it. And a lot of times it's because the people in the community don't stand up and take responsibility or take ownership of their community. That's really what it is. And so then these people just take in and go for it. If you do not stand up as an individual in your community, be it your small town all the way to nationally, they're going to take it. That's it.
And they're fast. They're very fast at it. And they're very insulting, and people go into kind of I always like, look at animals. There's that thing where an animal, it doesn't know whether to fight or fly away, it freezes. And I see that with people when somebody's really bombastic and that huge personality comes in, takes over, they go into that frozen mode.
Well, that's one of the voter groups that I list. I talk about four-way voter split in the book. I think time-wise, I'm not going to try to explain that, but encourage people to get the book.
Absolutely.
To see. But people tend to have a fight, flight, or freeze response, or follow. And that's why these folks get into power, is because they get enough followers that just believe everything they say. And I say, don't believe anybody, everything they say. You've got to have a critical mind.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, again, Mr. Bill Eddy, and that's Eddy, because you can do EDIE, but you can't. It's Bill Eddy, Why We Elect Narcissists and Sociopaths and How We Can Stop. Again, you can go to highconflictinstitute.com, get the book on Amazon, all those great places. Just a pleasure having you back. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for writing the book. Let's get it out there. Thank you.
Jagoffs on the TV, spouting daily deathly news. Blowhards on the airways, spewing homophobic blues. Scumbags and rapists and jihadists stealing girls. Grab your morning cup of joe. Welcome to Maniac World. Shooting off their gruesome load. They in your face, they in your space, they took over your abode. Just the sight of the sound of them enough to make me wanna hurl. I say we bag 'em up and drop 'em off of this maniac world. Remember when we had a common sense of sanity? Then someone came along and stole humanity. While we wallow in self-righteous greed and vanity, mass killing became the new profanity. Crooked politicians, Wall Street rats and moles, power broker douchebags, lobby monger trolls. They're all a seething heart of serpents. I say we burn them all in earth. Grab your morning cup of joe, yeah. Here comes maniac world. Yeah, grab your coffee.